Hello and welcome to Insight, everyone. I'm Nnamdi Odigbo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. Thank you for joining us.
This week we review how political parties are conducting their primaries in line with the 2026 Electoral Act and INEC's timeline. Hamza Aliu, Executive Director, Initiative for Grassroots Advancement in Nigeria, INGRA, is on hand to discuss how the law intersects with the reality.
And we'll also examine the Renewed Hope initiative hinged on pillars and how it is translating to individual and national growth. And Dr. Rufus Ibegba, Grand Patron, Team Senator Oluremi for Tinubu 2027, will speak to us.
Whatever the issues are,
the National Assembly is constitutionally empowered to scrutinize.
However complex or intricate.
We have involved all the academia, the members of the academia. We have involved the academies.
Be it government policies or in fact any issue of public concern.
Our job is to help you gain clarity and make sense of it all.
This is not really healthy for our democracy.
There's a lot of aggrievance in terms of who has been in power longest and who becomes the governor of the state.
It's also in the quality of food being consumed.
After all, perception is insight.
And gaining understanding is also getting.
Electoral Act 2026 represents Nigeria's most ambitious attempt, to reform party primaries in decades. By abolishing indirect primaries and mandating either direct primaries or genuine consensus, the Electoral Act 2026 seeks to democratize candidate selection and reduce the influence of money in politics. Yet, there are unfolding issues, especially this primary election season. And we're saying that it is not Uhuru yet. And this is in terms of internal party democracy in Nigeria. Of course, going by claims and talks of imposition and all sorts that we're hearing, within and from political parties, even now, as they walk around the issue of consensus in selecting preferred candidates ahead of the 2027 elections. Let me bring in my guest, Hamza Aliu, Executive Director, Initiative for Grassroots Advancement in Nigeria, INGRA. Hamza is our regular customer. Hamza, good to have you on Insight as always. Good to see you once again.
Thank you for having me again, Nnamdi. Good to be here again.
Fantastic. So we currently have a well-intentioned reform, and that's speaking about the Electoral Act 2026. And you and I know it may not be the perfect piece of legislation, but it appears to have shown the shift, some positive shift, towards where we should be headed to as a country, and that's democratically. But drawing from some of the early experiences that we're gleaning from the field, from some of the primaries being held so far, and I'm not referring to any of the parties, I'm saying generically, whether it's SDP or APC or whichever party has held its primaries, we're hearing just about the same thing. We're seeing progress, genuine progress, like I've talked about. Yet we appear to be seeing some of those challenges that we seem to have carried over from the 2022 Electoral Act. Hamza, since our focus is basically on restructuring of the party nomination processes, I would like your thoughts. First and foremost, so now you think this whole reform process for party primaries positively intersects with our attempt as a country, as a democracy, to engender internal democracy within parties, or, generally in Nigeria, politically, of course.
Well, thank you, Nnamdi, for that question. It goes to the heart of what political parties represent in Nigeria's democracy. It's not just a special purpose vehicle for leadership selection, but it also embodies our desire for active participation of the components that make up our community. And so it's this attempt by us to try to engender internal democracy of political parties is a form of acknowledgement that we have failed as a people to have political parties that are built on value system that embodies what we represent. And so this attempt clearly shows that we are trying to change the status quo. Yes, we wanted to look at how can we engender internal party democracy, internal participation, internal acceptance by people that make up the political parties, because political parties are made up of people, not of animals or non-humans. They are humans. And so it is important that if these special purpose vehicles that we are going to use for elections, for selecting our leaders, is going to be participatory. We want to see it begin within the political parties. And yes, like we said, our changing of the electoral law to ensure that what we have now, which is a consensus agreement or a direct primaries where members of the political party take part in selecting who becomes the candidate, because at the end of the day, it is the candidates that we, the electorate, are left with to choose during elections, because we're actually electing political parties and not the candidates themselves. So whoever stands on the platform of the political party automatically gets our vote. And so we need the political parties to be able to select the best amongst the aspirants and provide and bring them to the election day. And so that is why you're seeing this attempt. But like you said, we're looking at deja vu all over again. We're still seeing the same issues, the same challenges we were running away from. That is godfatherism, big political money bags. Are they still there? The answer is we're beginning to hear the same cries we heard before the changes came up are still being there. Imposition of candidates. People are still being felt, people are still feeling that they are being marginalized out of the system. It is because the parties, the way they are structured, are not meant to be participatory in nature. It is the big wigs that form political parties. If you look at all the political parties that we have in Nigeria currently, you can count the people who form those political parties. And because of that, you're seeing the same problem playing out. If you say you want consensus, it's the same political money bags and big wigs that will sit down and form consensus. Even though the Electoral Act says it has to be consensus by the aspirants, and there must be a signed document to that arrangement. But you're not seeing it play out. None of the political parties is going for direct primaries where the members of political parties take part in selecting the aspirants.
No, Hamza, we've seen direct primaries play out in some states, in some cases, and not specific to any of the parties now, but I can assure you that we have also on our own as NTA monitored some direct primaries. But let me just take a couple of steps back, and in your opening remarks, I think essentially what we are seeing play out, or what we've seen play out, especially with regards the 2026 Electoral Act, is an acknowledgement by the system, for a need to shift, to move. That is the system acknowledging that, look, it is not essentially the result of election that is the cross, that is the all and all. But the process that leads to the selection of candidates, that leads to that end result also matters. And that is why a lot of people, in spite of what critics say about the 2026 Electoral Act, opposition parties, you remember they quickly and easily dismissed it. But I think generally the system in itself acknowledged that, look, there is something that we need to fix. But then, like you've rightly said, and just like we've noted, there are cries and claims and allegations, being as this election season unfolds. I'd like to know, what do you say about this rather persistent tendency to treat consensus, and this is since you've raised the issue of consensus already, to treat consensus as a euphemism for imposition of preferred candidates. I was talking about what critics and how critics of the Electoral Act argued that, what we now have as a law, as an Electoral Act, at the moment, is a situation where the elite may successfully capture the entire process. Do you think that there's logic in that argument? Do you think that when you talked about, for instance, you talked about getting the written consent requirement for consensus, do you think that is enough as a legal recourse for those who think consensus is not working here? And what might just be working is elite capture or elite-driven imposition of candidates?
Yes, Nnamdi, it goes back again to that same thing we're talking about. Who owns the political party? Unless we're able to define who owns the political party, we're going to keep coming back to this same issue consistently, because it's the people who own the political parties that determines how the selection should be. Ordinarily, political parties are supposed to be autonomous. There is not supposed to be a law that should govern how political parties conduct their issues. It's internal issues. But the fact that we are struggling to determine who owns the political party, you're now seeing us attempting to put hand into a political party's affairs, and the courts have stated it very clear. But it presupposes that whoever owns the political party and set up their own internal mechanisms for conducting their activities will control the political parties. Ordinarily, it should be the people who form the political parties. But this in Nigeria, the people who form political parties are a few people. They get together, they form political parties, and they call on every person to come in, just like every association. So you see that no matter what mechanism you want to bring on board to say this is how we should select our aspirants or candidates, you're going to see the same thing play out. Like you said, currently we now have consensus as a euphemism for opposition, because it is the people who come to consensus that will determine who becomes the candidate of the party. Even if you say no, all political parties must go through direct primaries, you're still going to hear the same cry, because it is the owners of the party that will determine who can vote at that direct primary.
But
and so you're going to see all political parties having the same thing.
Doesn't the fact that the proviso in the Electoral Act in sections 84 subsection 2 of the Act, which says that, look, and that is where it spells out the mode and all of that, and also talks about what consensus is, that, look, there has to be the written consent of those who were part of the process. Isn't that enough to make it at least some broad-based, at least, to make, doesn't that say, look, at least there were inputs from other contending parties in the primaries?
You see, I will tell you something for free. If we try to tighten what happens in political parties, if you try to tighten it as much as possible, politicians will go to court to claim that you are infringing of their rights to freedom of association. They have not gone to court yet because they still know that the consensus arrangement can still give them the outcome they're looking for. That's why you can hear that all of them are all agreeing to it. Okay, let's go consensus. Let's go consensus. Let's go to. If you go further than this and tighten it, somebody will go to court. And legally speaking, an association is autonomous. It is left for those who are selecting, who are voting, to vote one political party over the other. We don't have the rights to go into a political party to start asking them, this is how you should select your candidates. No. If the party says we're going to select our candidates by throwing the stone, or by throwing water in the air, or by praying, of course, that is their own prerogative. But now we are struggling, like you said, we are trying to make the system better. We have tried many formats and it's not working. We need to try something else, but there's a limit to which we can push. We have pushed to the level where we said consensus. Fine. Let's see what that consensus is bringing up. Like you said, it's still bringing up the same old challenges that were found.
No,
where few persons
but I did say, I said it's showing, not consensus per se, but I did say that
consensus is showing up the same thing. Everywhere you turn around, you hear, no, this was not a consensus. This person was not the consensus of the party. We didn't know at what point people sat down and came up with consensus. It's the same thing. That's been there since political parties have been doing election in 1960. We have always gone through this process. How do we select the candidates of political parties? And unless they get it right, we can't get our democracy right. And that is the battle that we are fighting. It's almost like a losing battle, because the human beings that make up these political parties are not genuine in their request for true democracy, for true participation. People want to impose their opinions on others, and they want you to take that opinion as fact, as legal. And that is why they have now input it. They have inputted it into our electoral system to say it says by consensus. And so once that consensus is reached, you can't go to court to say it was not consensus anymore. You can see where is the catch 50-50 issue that we have right now. Unless we're able to find a way around the people who make up these political parties, to get them to understand that whatever they do in their party affects the outcome of our elections. Unless we're able to do that, we'll keep coming back to this. It's a vicious circle. And it's a sad narrative for our democracy that we seem not to be able to go around or come out of this quagmire we found ourselves in.
But the point is to break out of this chain, break out of this circle and make progress. And I think that's essentially the hope and expectations of many when we had, public hearings on the 2026 Electoral Act And I think it is right to assume that the shift to direct primaries would ordinarily or invariably require political parties to develop genuine grassroots structures, since now they on their own have to maintain an up-to-date membership register, which of course they must submit to INEC 21 days before they hold any primaries. I wonder what you think, what promise that holds for the general elections in terms of grassroots participation in our democracy, because this is something we've always wanted to have, more people participating in the democratic process.
Like you said, this is what we wanted to have. So this is the ideal situation we wanted our democracy to look like. People are participating, determining what happens in political parties. From there, people will participate to determine who becomes the leader of political leadership across all governments. That is the ideal situation. But because we have missed one key ingredient, we've forgotten that it's people that govern these spaces. Unless we get the character of the people correct, get the process correct, people that form these political parties are not, lack of a better phrase, they are not there to do justice to democracy. They are there for their own personal interest. And so unless we begin to reorientate our people that whatever we do in our small spheres, in our small areas, in this political dispensation that we're practicing, we're able to get the mindset of the people who go to political parties and the democratic space. Unless we've gotten them to that level where they understand that whatever they do has repercussion for our electoral process, we're still going to be going around in circles. Like you said, political parties are supposed to have brought in or sent in their voter or their membership list.
Digital membership
of course,
list.
as we speak, many political,
digital membership list 21 days before they hold any primaries.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Clearly, please go ahead.
Yes. So I say, as we speak, many of them have not been their repercussion. You're going to see that a lot of the elections, the electoral process in 2027 will end up in the courts. Because INEC will say, you had a time frame for you to submit ABC. Did you do it within the time frame? Many political parties are struggling to even have their primaries conducted. They are struggling within themselves to even follow their own laid down rules. Why is that so? Is it that something that govern our people? We make rules for us and we don't keep it. So my fear is that going forward towards the election, we're going to hear a lot of litigations around internal democracies of political parties. Primaries, all the things that we try to stop getting to the election day issue will now become a thing of problem for us when we get into the election itself. I'm not seeing us really coming out of this in a good way. It's going to be more problematic for us as we move forward.
So, Amza, earlier on when you talked about the attractiveness or apparent attractiveness of the consensus, for most of the political parties engaged in this season of primary elections, in terms, in their bid to selecting their candidates. You raised the poser somewhat as to not being sure of why, they were all adopting consensus rather than direct primaries. But I suspect that there might be a reason. And I'm not speaking for the parties, but I know that direct primaries, for instance, which is supposed to expand the franchise within political parties, noble in itself. But, I don't know if that is easily achievable. I think we all get that, yes. It would reduce the ability of a small group of delegates to be captured by the highest bidder like we used to have with indirect primaries in the past. And, it would also force aspirants to appeal to ordinary party members, rather than a handful of powerful godfathers. But, in principle, a direct primaries aligns with the ideas that we all want. those normative ideas that democracy should begin within the parties before it extends to the general electorate. But like you have said here, ideals vary from realities, particularly when you reflect one, and I am, again, not speaking for the parties, but if you think of the near logistical impossibility of holding direct primaries, if you think of the cost of holding one, if you think of, we've just talked about this digital membership register and how that in itself is also a challenge. I mean, do you not think that, look, all of this put together, doesn't it make consensus, the logical and apparently attractive way to go? In spite of all we have to say, whether consensus is a euphemism for cohesion or not, doesn't that just make it attractive?
The cheapest thing to do is direct primaries. It's the cheapest thing to do.
Really?
It doesn't cost anybody any amount of money to do it. All you need is show up at your party headquarters or a party venue and talk to your people, talk to your members and say, I am the best candidate. Please vote for me. This is what I will do. The only cost it will cost to you, transport yourself to that place. Your party members will transport themselves to that place and you will do elections. But because we have agreed that
there'll
these
be
parties
ballot
that we have,
there'll be ballot papers, there'll be cubicle, there'll be seats, there'll be water, there'll be logistics that the party also needs to put in place.
If we agree that we are part people, then you need all these things to take place for you to have elections. If we agree we are good people and that we are men and women of honor, it simply means that we go there and we raise our hands and say, this is the person we want, or we write it on a paper and we put it in somewhere in a basket. We have seen countries where elections are done in the open with sticks and stones. It is based on, do you believe that we are good people? But because we have accepted that we are not good people, that's why we're running around in circles trying to change laws. Laws don't change people. People change by themselves. So we need to get to that point. If, as we currently, the contraption that we have as political parties, the way they are currently configured, they will not give us that direct primaries that we're looking for. No, they will not, because they are vested personal interests in these political parties. For us to get it right, then the present form in which these political parties are based will have to change. We will need to find another format in which we develop or we establish political parties and control political parties. Once it is not ideologically based, once it is not about issues, then we can't have it correct. But like you said, we have to agree that the best form we can get now, let's do the consensus. Let the money bags sit together and give up somebody that will be our candidate. And we, the citizens, will have no choice than to go and vote for the person.
So, I mean, it's sounding like, I don't know, but if you were to go with the Electoral Act the way it is, do you still think, and this is in rounding off our conversation right now, I mean, but before then, I must apologize to our viewer for the quality of our connection. Yeah, today has been particularly hectic. I tell you, I mean, we've had better times, I must say. But again, I would like to apologize. And then let's just round off this conversation. I was saying, going by what we have on ground right now and seeing from all that we're seeing play out in this season's primaries, in this primaries and political party primary season, how best do you think INEC, maybe even political parties themselves, and persons like you, civil society, can work collaboratively to ensure that, Sections 84 sub 2 of the Electoral Act ends that practice, the practice where we see party leaders, whether they are governors or call them godfather or whatever we want to call them, and pick candidates and present them as the party's nominee. Is that still in line with the same thing you're saying about the formation or the, parties, monitoring parties from their formative state and making them more organic rather than having just a single individual forming a party and hijacking the entire structure? Because otherwise, which other structure can we have at that level that can genuinely throw up a competitive process for selecting candidates, to represent these parties in elections?
Well, Nnamdi, on that particular note, we have seen there are consequences for political parties that do not follow these guidelines, whether it is their internal policies or the Electoral Act. We've seen severally these political parties that lose out completely in the electoral process. They go to court and court will squash every election. We saw it happen in Zamfara. We saw it happen in Rivers. So we know that there are consequences. Now the question is, do the politicians understand these consequences? Do they believe these consequences applies to them? We have seen political parties that are busy hounding INEC for trying to sanitize the process. That is a very negative way for politicians to look at our system. And it shows clearly that the mindset of the people are not aligned to what we want as politicians. So we need to understand that it is going to be difficult for us to have the system correct if the people who are today's politicians not take into consideration the effect that their actions have on Nigeria as a nation. Our nation comes first before political parties, and we must not allow individuals who want to control political parties to go ahead and disrupt our electoral process. Let's begin to look at the systems that make up political parties, in at the after effect of the political party.
I think this is a good place to end our conversation because our connections has not been fantastic, I must say.
At all.
Yes, it does, and that is quite regrettable considering, the gravity, and importance of this issue that we're discussing. But of course, the primaries are still on. I mean, we're in the season. We would reach out to you again and see if we can reenact this conversation. If not reenact, have another conversation bordering on some of the issues that we've talked about here today. Hamza Aliu, Executive Director, Initiative for Grassroots Advancement in Nigeria, INGRA. Thank you so much. And I would like to apologize to our viewers once again. We're sorry for the poor network connectivity. It's Hamza and his Lokoja network. Hopefully he gets a better network next time when he joins us from Lokoja to be part of this conversation. Hamza, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me again.
Fantastic. Elizabeth Omori is up next. She will be talking about the Renewed Hope Initiative, a pet project of Nigeria's First Lady, and how it's impacting lives and changing the narratives. Elizabeth Omori is up next.